Welcome to our first tutorial for Risk Parity Radio. This comes from our episode 121. We had a question from a listener who would like to have more instruction as to how to use the retirement spending calculator at portfolio charts. And so that's what we're going to look at today. And we have here the homepage for portfoliocharts.com. You can go there first. Then to find the calculator, you just click on the charts. And then we go down to the charts, and the one we are interested in is this one, the retirement spending calculator. And so we'll just go ahead and click on that, and we bring it up right here. And so now we can scroll down in this calculator. And you see it already has a portfolio put in here. It starts it at the 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks and 40% intermediate term treasury bonds, but then you can change these boxes to make it match your personal portfolio, which we'll be doing here as we go along. Now, if we go down here, we see the withdrawal rules settings, and it starts with a sample portfolio of $1 million and an annual withdrawal rate of 5%. And you can click on this and change it to 4% or whatever else you want to change it to. We'll just leave it at 5% for now. And then over here, it has rules on how it would change over time. And so this change limit is how much the portfolio would be allowed to increase or decrease from year to year. This account trigger allows you to set it so that if it goes up a certain percentage, then it will change these change limits. And then it also has withdrawal limits, so you can set the maximum withdrawal or the minimum withdrawal for the portfolio. Now, this is a little bit of overkill because mostly you won't need all of these features here. And you can just X them out, the ones you don't want. So let's just go to the most simple ideas here. Typically, when you're talking about a portfolio and the safe withdrawal rate and how withdrawals are done, the assumption that is made for the 4% rule and those sorts of things that Bengen made in the original study and was in the Trinity studies is that you would be taking out the same amount of money every year based on the original calculation. So in this case, if you were doing a 5% withdrawal rate on $1 million portfolio, you would take out every year $50,000 and it would only be adjusted for inflation. Now, everything in here is already adjusted for inflation, so that it will display this as a flat withdrawal. And this is the Monte Carlo simulation as to what are the possibilities of happening for this particular withdrawal strategy. You see it set so that the withdrawal is a constant 5% of the original amount, or $50,000 a year. And these are all of the potential outcomes for this 5% withdrawal rate for this 60-40 portfolio. And so you can see here, and what we're most interested in is how many times did it fail? And over this 50-year period of modeling from 1970, 51 years actually, you can see that this strategy failed 5 times. And so that is an undesirable failure rate. You will find if you put in lower withdrawal rates, the thing will succeed. If you put in a 4% withdrawal rate, this 60-40 portfolio will succeed. And the modification is made automatically, and you see there at no point did it fail. Did it ever completely fail at a 4% withdrawal rate? And that's going to be true of most portfolios. The original bad period for portfolios was the period from 1966 up through 1980 when you would see the most failure rates. Since this one starts at 1970, you're seldom going to see a failure rate at 4%. If you go down here, you can see the explanations for the various calculators up there, and I won't go reading through these, but down at the bottom it gives you some sample ones. So this is the basic assumptions that we are looking at now in that portfolio, where we have a constant withdrawal rate based on the original amount, and so you put the zeros in there. Now, a more realistic strategy is a constant percentage rate, where you take out a constant percentage based on the amount you have at the beginning of the year. And so if we were to go back up here and do that, you just put in X's here and here. You see how that's changing every time you put something else in there. And that gives you, and we'll go back and put this at 5%. And you can see that you're going to get a variety of outcomes. It's never going to fail, because obviously if you're only taking 5%, no matter how small it gets, the 5% is never going to kill the portfolio. What you see, though, also is that the amount withdrawn is going to vary greatly. So you could be withdrawing as little as about $25,000 if you see these things down here in some scenarios, and then as much as $130,000. And so your withdrawals are going to be very variable with this. And so you might want to try out some of these advanced features. So one idea that Bill Bengen also had is that maybe you want to not have such a wide variety of withdrawals. So he proposed a strategy which is described down here, where the withdrawals would be never going below 85% here, so a 15% reduction, and never going above 120% as far as the withdrawal rates are concerned. And so you can go back up here and just put those numbers in, a 20 and a 15, and it will automatically change the outcomes as you put the numbers in. And you can see that the withdrawal amounts have this ceiling and this floor that restricts them, but that this portfolio does fail several times with using that withdrawal strategy. So that may not be something you want. And it gives you other ideas down here. Here's another, the quiet 95% rule. And here's something called the Kitsis ratchet, where it never reduces your withdrawals, but it will increase them 10% if your account gets to 50% or greater. So we'll just go back and put those in, 10, 50, and 0 in those boxes. And go back up here and see what that's like. It was 10, 50 there. You just X this out when you don't want it anymore. And a 0 in this box. And for that, for this 60-40 portfolio, we see that it has a number of failures. The account, it looks like it would be going up and down a lot. Here is the withdrawal amounts increasing and the failure rates for this 60-40 portfolio at a 5% withdrawal rate. Now, of course, you can reduce it to 4%, and it will behave, and it will survive 4%, as most portfolios will. So it gets more interesting then, though, when you compare different portfolios with the same withdrawal strategy. And you can go up and put in the different portfolios here. But what I've done is created several more tabs so we don't have to keep putting these numbers in, and we can easily compare them. And so now I'll start flipping between the tabs, and we can see how this 60/40 portfolio compares with a golden butterfly portfolio on kind of standard withdrawal strategies, a golden ratio portfolio, and a kind of bucket strategy kind of portfolio, which I'll show you momentarily here. And so now we'll go over to the first tab here where we just put in the 60/40 portfolio again to remind you. And this is the constant dollar withdrawal strategy. So it's at 5% adjusted for inflation. As we saw, it failed 4 times in this simulation, actually 5 times in this simulation. And so now what if we did the same strategy though, and we did it to the golden butterfly portfolio? So here we have the golden butterfly portfolio. It's 20% total stock market, 20% small cap value, 20% long-term treasuries, 20% short-term treasuries, and 20% gold. And if you slide down here, same strategy, same rate of withdrawal, you can see that it performs much better. It never fails. And in fact, it almost never gets very low at all, that this is kind of the minimum in the portfolio the whole time. So you can see it's a much more steady kind of withdrawal to it and keeps its shape well. Now what's interesting is you can go up here and you can just keep increasing the withdrawal rate to see how much it can take. Sorry for that little hiccup, but let's go ahead and take this golden butterfly portfolio and raise the withdrawal rate to 6%. And now you see it does fail a couple of times, so that's pushing it off to its limit, much different than the 5%. Of course, if you go down to 4%, it works like a dream and barely ever goes below its original holding. So you can see that you probably take out more than 4% in this portfolio in retirement and have no trouble whatsoever. So now let's go to the golden ratio portfolio, and that's, we put in this tab. It's got 21% large cap growth, 21% small cap value, 26% long-term treasuries, 16% gold, 10% REITs, and 6% in cash. That's T-bills there. And this one is set on 5%. And you can see it also has a nice ride, that it stays pretty constant to up, even at a 5% withdrawal rate. Try this again here. We've got this golden ratio portfolio again and the 5%. And if we change that to 6%, just to see how that would affect it, it actually has 3 failures at that rate. We change it to 4%. You would see that kind of performance. And so again, this is a very comfortable portfolio to hold in retirement and can withstand safe withdrawal rates pretty easily over 4% and up to 5% without much trouble. So next I wanted to take a look at something that is akin to a bucket strategy kind of portfolio and see what that does. Just give me a little minute here to get that set up. And so we're going to flip over to that tab now. And here is a typical kind of 70-30 kind of portfolio that I hear people talk about these days. And they call this a bucket strategy because they've essentially got 15% or about 3 years in cash sitting in there, somewhere between 10 and 15%. Then they've got some intermediate term bonds or short-term bonds, and then they've got about 70% of their portfolio in stocks. And this is kind of typical to have 40% in total stock market, a smaller portion in small cap value, and then some in international. And so if you go down here and see how this performs at a 5% rate, it does fail a couple times. So this is not as good as the golden butterfly or golden ratio when you stress test it at 5%. Of course, it's going to perform at 4%. It is, as you can see, a lot more variable in its performance there. And then, of course, if you stretch it up to 6%, you're going to see a lot more failure there and a lot earlier than you would with some of those other portfolios. But the point of this is twofold, that you can use this to model your own portfolio to see how it performs, but then you can also use it to compare with other portfolios and put them through kind of stress testing with higher safe withdrawal rates, because you know if they can withstand a high safe withdrawal rate, they certainly can withstand a much lower one. And then you'd have more flexibility in retirement to take more money if you actually needed it. We'll just look at a few more things here. Now I'm going to show you some variations on the same withdrawal strategy. The same portfolio using different withdrawal strategies. The same basic percentage of withdrawal. We'll use the golden ratio portfolio for these. Now here we have the golden ratio portfolio, and you can see what it is there. At a 5% withdrawal rate, this is a constant percentage withdrawal, so it's never going to run out of money here. And you can see how the account values go. And then you can see the withdrawal amounts. And so what you're most concerned about here is if you took this strategy where you just took up 5% of it at the beginning of the year, it could go down to $40,000. It could lose about 20% of the value, in which case your retirement income for that year would fall about 20%. Remember, this is adjusted for inflation, so that's already taken care of. But you can see how that looks. And so that's a variable withdrawal rate. And then we're going to go over here and take a look at one of these other potential ones. This is something Bill Bengen suggested that, well, maybe you want to limit your withdrawals to a 20% increase and a 15% decrease, so they're not so variable. And what happens if you do that? At a 5% withdrawal rate, you can see that's no problem, and then you can see how this is kept in this floor and ceiling here so that your withdrawals never get too high or too low. And that's another method of withdrawing from a portfolio. Then, of course, you can always tweak these things and see what happens when you put in more. See, so here you can see I've gone to a 6% base withdrawal rate with this golden ratio portfolio, but did withdrawal limits of no higher than 20% more than that or no lower than 15% less. And you can see it still does fine. It still survives in terms of the account values. And then these would be the withdrawals you'd be doing. So you'd never go below 50 or 51 here, and you'd never go above 72 there, but it would keep you in a nice range. And let's take a look at another option here. This is the Kitsis ratchet that is suggested down below as another potential withdrawal strategy. And you can see that this never reduces your withdrawal, but it will increase it by 10% if the account value goes up by 50% or more. So you can see in this instance that you never go below the original 5% or 50,000 on a million, adjusted for inflation. But then if you do have more in the portfolio, you start taking out more as time goes on. And again, that has a pretty decent characteristic here in terms of how much would be in the portfolio and how much you'd be able to withdraw. And then another possibility, this is presented as the Guyton-Klinger withdrawal strategy. And so this one, you can see allows for increases of 10% in the withdrawals if the account gets over 25% more, and then it declines 10% if the account decreases by 25%. And you can see how that plays out, and this is what the withdrawal amounts would be. So they never seem to go below 40, but they could go up substantially over time if the account increases. And you can see how that would be in here. So what is the upshot of all these things here? I think for most people, taking a look at their portfolio in terms of this constant dollar withdrawal strategy, the original 4% rule assumption, and then just going ahead and increasing this incrementally to see how far it can go is often a useful exercise. You can see it makes it on a 40-year time frame to even 5%. This is the golden ratio portfolio. But then when you get to, I think, about 5.9, let's see if we do 5.8 and what it looks like. Yeah, it starts failing around 5.8% or 58,000 on 1 million over a long period of time. Now, this is probably the most severe, though, you're going to have, because in reality, what you're probably going to be doing is withdrawing much less than that and withdrawing a variable amount. So then you also want to look at what it looks like if it's just a variable amount. If you were just to withdraw 5.8% every year, and you would get that, obviously it's going to be a more smooth ride if you have a lower number here. But if your portfolio does well in both of those two circumstances, that's a pretty good indication that you have a good portfolio and a flexible plan for when you actually retire, in which case you'll probably be taking out hopefully around 3% as your base living expenses, and then having that 2 extra percent to do as you please with, but not being hamstrung with the idea that you have to have so much more money in order to be able to retire and can only withdraw 3 or 3.5%. Now, it is interesting to look at something like, well, what if you just kept all your money in stocks? And we can do that. Go to 100% stocks, and you can see how variable your withdrawals might be. If you were just doing 5% every year, mathematically you're never going to run out of money that way. If you tried 5% constant, you can see it begins to fail in 18 years and fails several times there. And so you would need to reduce it. I think it probably survives at 4. Yeah. Although it looks pretty ugly in some things, in some scenarios with respect to that. And the reason it survives at 4 is because it does not, this database does not take into account those 3 or 4 years before 1970, which gave you the worst year. Obviously, a 450% withdrawal rate is not going to work. 4.5 with this, you're getting some failures there. This is a 100% stock portfolio. So you can see that just by changing your portfolio, you're going to get much better possible safe withdrawal rates. And our risk parity style portfolios are designed to make this as big a number as possible, regardless of what you put into these boxes over here. And I hope this tutorial has been useful. Probably not the most professional job I've ever done, but I think it'll do for what we are trying to accomplish here, which is just to inform. Thank you for tuning into it, and please join me every week or twice a week on the Risk Parity Radio podcast, which you can find at the link below and at Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for tuning in. This is Frank Vasquez with Risk Parity Radio, signing off.